but we're all writing different songs, so it keeps us interested. So for about 13 years or whatever, that was interesting enough for us to carry on. And as far as I was concerned, all Queen albums were little solo projects anyway. I was writing my kind of songs that I wanted.
Freddie Mercury died in 1991, but in 2024, workers found a hidden chamber behind a wardrobe in his London mansion. Inside were childhood photos, handwritten drafts, and unreleased demos worth millions. No one knew this room existed, and that wasn't the only secret. There were whispers about a daughter, born in 1976 to a married woman. Rumors of 17 hidden journals he wrote about his childhood. Stories about a princess sneaking into gay bars with him. For decades, people dismissed these tales as fantasy, but the evidence keeps surfacing. What else did Freddie Mercury hide from the world? Freddie Mercury came into the world as Farrokh Bulsara on September 5, 1946, in Stone Town, Zanzibar, and his early life unfolded under British protectorate rule, where cultures mixed and tensions quietly simmered. His parents, Bomi and Jer Bulsara, were Parsi Zoroastrians from Gujarat who carried faith and tradition with them after their own ancestors fled Iran centuries earlier to avoid forced conversion. Bomi worked as a cashier, earning about £20 a month for the British Colonial Office, counting stamps and cash, in a small office while the family lived in a modest two-story home at 590 Shangani Street. The house sat in the middle of a town where Arab, Indian, and African lives crossed each other, and clove plantations filled the air with a sharp sweetness that didn't hide the class divide between Arab elites and everyone else. Farrokh grew up inside rules that warned him against meat, alcohol, and anything close to Western music. But curiosity slipped through those cracks anyway. At 7, while staying with relatives in Bombay in 1953, he began touching a piano in secret, pressing keys to imitate Bollywood stars until his fingers grew strong enough to one day travel from F2 to F5 in songs like Bohemian Rhapsody. Life shifted again years later when whispers of a revolution began spreading, because families tied to British jobs were suddenly in danger. When he returned to Zanzibar at 17 in February 1963, he watched independence parades turn into terror on January 12, 1964, when rebels led by John Okello stormed the island and killed thousands within hours. Some accounts spoke of 5,000 lives lost. Others said it was closer to 20,000. Shops burned. Women were attacked in the streets. The Sultan fled on a yacht. And the Bulsara family packed their suitcases, took police escorts, and boarded the Salama in March 1964, sailing first to Mombasa and then to England, where they arrived with almost nothing and applied for £5 of refugee aid. His childhood isolation had already shaped him long before that escape. At 8, he was sent alone to St. Peter's Boys' School in Panchgani, India, 3,000 miles from home, because his parents believed a British-style boarding school would help his future. He lived in dorms with 50 boys, woke before sunrise for prayers, and followed strict routines with no family visits until holidays. During choir tryouts, Headmaster G. MacLeod noticed his ear for music, but choir master Gerald Richardson later rejected him at 14 and said he would never be a singer. That moment crushed him into silence for a long time. Yet something else kept him moving. A piano teacher snuck him into after-hours lessons once the lights went out at 9. They practiced in the dark by touch, and Farrokh reached grade 4 piano and theory by 1958. The shy boy formed the Hectics at age 12, pounding keys during the 1960 talent show so wildly that the auditorium erupted into cheers for minutes. He sketched band logos in notebooks, boxed for fitness, and traded stamps the way his father did. When he returned to Zanzibar in early 1963, at 16, taller and deeper voiced, he had no idea the revolution would erase everything familiar within months. forcing him into a new life that would sharpen his voice and courage until he could command a 4-octave range that made choir snobs look foolish. The revolution's escape stayed with him. In early 1964, as violence swallowed the island, the Bulsaras hid inside their home, while rebels attacked Arab and Indian neighborhoods. Reports by American diplomat Donald Pedersen recorded thousands dead, and later rebel claims listed even higher numbers. Bomi traded gold bangles for ship passage because families tied to the colonial office were seen as enemies. They boarded the Salama on March 2, 1964, under gunfire and sailed toward safety. They reached England in April with only £4, some clothes, and a small stamp collection. Zanzibar lost a quarter of its Arab population. Tens of thousands fled. The Bulsaras became part of that wave and ended up in Feltham as refugees. Feltham was a cold adjustment. They arrived in April 1964 and squeezed into an 8-by-8-foot attic at 22 Gladstone Avenue, sharing damp walls and one bathroom while welfare covered the £3 weekly rent. Farouk, now 17, tried to hide the parts of himself that felt too bright for the quiet neighborhood. His long hair and bell-bottoms invited disapproval from conservative Parsi elders who labeled Western music as evil. He worked wherever he could. He lifted fruit crates at Feltham Market for £2 a day. He handled luggage on Heathrow night shifts until 2 in the morning. He cleaned at Ealing Art College for £1.50 an hour while studying graphics from 1966 to 1969. Some nights he slept on the floor, ate lentils, and kept drawings under his pillow. His mother once found early sketches of the future Queen logo years before anyone else would see it. Bomi pushed dentistry because it promised a steady £500 salary, but Farouk refused every attempt. He said his voice was his career and held his ground. He kept gigging with small bands for £10 a night and slowly worked his way toward the life he felt forming inside him. Dentistry never stood a chance. Bomi even enrolled him in a dental course at Isleworth Polytechnic, but Farouk skipped classes and chased art instead. His teeth added another layer to the story. He had 4 extra incisors that caused an overbite and spaced his canines 4 millimeters apart, and those unusual teeth shaped the resonance of his voice. Dentists warned that removing them could drop his pitch by an entire octave. Brian May later admitted he almost rejected him from Queen in 1970 over the tooth gap, worried about image. Farouk insisted his voice depended on that overbite. By 1970, he was sketching the Queen crest again, this time with more certainty. Lions for Roger and John, a crab for Brain, fairies for himself, a crowned Q rising behind them all. His father finally relented years later when Queen's success exploded. Freddie kept those teeth untouched forever, refusing £10,000 fixes out of fear he would lose the sound that set him apart. Those years between 1964 and 1970 built the artist he was becoming. He studied art at Isleworth in 1966 and switched to Ealing Art College in 1969, graduating that summer with a diploma in graphic design. Money was always short. He worked as a baggage handler at Heathrow for £6 a week and drew outfits that mixed Victorian elegance with futuristic shapes. His classmates called him a freak for those designs, not realizing they were watching the birth of a rock icon. He even sewed some of his stage capes by hand. In 1969, he designed Queen's crest long before the band formed officially, pouring zodiac meanings into every line. That same year, he met Mary Austin at a boutique, discovering a connection that shaped his early adult life. And as he explored his identity quietly in London's emerging gay scene after the 1967 law change, he lived a double life. He dated Mary publicly, visited clubs privately, sketched fantasies in journals no one has seen, and slowly built the persona that would one day walk onto stages with a confidence the world could not ignore. Music kept pulling him. In 1969, he joined a Liverpool blues band called Ibex after seeing them play at a Bolton market. He auditioned on August 13th and joined on the spot. They renamed their group Wreckage because of his push toward something bolder. Their debut on August 23rd at Dovedale Towers on Penny Lane drew 100 fans who screamed for encores. But the band crumbled fast. Egos clashed. Members quit. Freddie demanded originals and wrote 2 songs that vanished over time. And the others abandoned him in a tiny flat above the pub, leaving him broke. He hitchhiked back to London, angry and determined, telling guitarist Mike Burson he would go international. His confidence sounded wild then, but he meant every word. Early 1970 brought another brief chapter with Sour Milk Sea, an Oxford blues band he joined after answering a Melody Maker ad. They played shows 2 to 3 times a week. And he wrote Step on Me, his first original to survive in any form, with strange chord jumps that pushed past blues rules. But fights erupted again when bassist Jeremy Gallup feared Freddie's influence. One argument ended with Gallup yanking all the amps and killing the band overnight. Freddie left at 23 with a feeling he was meant for something larger, even if he didn't know how close he already was. Everything changed in April 1970 when he auditioned for Smile, the band formed by Brian May and Roger Taylor after Tim Staffel quit. Freddie had followed them from school days and believed he belonged with them. His audition was messy. He plugged a microphone into the wrong amp, yanked cables, and shouted the word Queen until it filled the room. Something about his energy sealed their decision. They played their first show together on June 27th in Truro, and Freddie insisted on changing the band name to Queen because he thought it sounded grand and bold. He legally changed his own name to Freddie Mercury soon after. By February 1971, John Deacon joined, completing the lineup that would change music history. Those early Queen years were fueled by hunger and desperation. They practiced in cramped rooms where amps overheated and sweat soaked the walls. They survived on 4-pound loans from college funds. Freddie worked nights in Kensington restaurants, scraping plates for tips. Brian pawned his guitar for rent. Roger sold blood for cash. But even in those tight rooms, they created songs like Son and Daughter, while rehearsing 12 hours straight until their fingers bled. Their first full show as Queen happened on July 3, 1971. Only 100 people came, but their screams told the band something important was building. John Deacon quietly wired homemade pedals from scrap metal, and Freddie's charisma filled every corner of the room. By 1973, the bond between them felt unbreakable. They pushed harder, recording a demo tape at Delane Lee Studios in late 1971. It held 5 tracks, including Keep Yourself Alive, yet 16 labels rejected them. Some offered deals so low they felt insulting, like the £5,000 offer from Charisma they walked away from in December 1972. They sold their Liar single from car trunks after gigs around 1972 and 1973, making only a few pounds each night. Debt climbed to £13,000 by mid-1973. Repossession agents took their amps twice. Brian pawned more gear. Roger borrowed sticks to perform. They even auditioned for DJ John Peel on April 3, 1973, and still walked out with nothing. But they kept going, playing more than 40 shows that year. Their persistence finally caught the attention of Trident Studios boss Norman Sheffield in July 1972, leading to a signing that August. It gave them off-hours access to the studio but also locked them into more debt. That struggle brought their debut album on July 13, 1973, a release born from exhaustion and refusal to quit. Producers Roy Thomas Baker and John Anthony discovered them accidentally during a December 1972 session, stunned by Freddie's operatic notes on Great King Rat. They helped shape the band's Trident deal that winter, granting endless studio hours, but no cash. The album was made between December 1972 and July 1973 in only 8 spread-out days. They spent sleepless nights layering more than 100 overdubs on lyre and burning through tape reels that cost £100 each. Freddie directed harmonies from a ladder where he almost got shocked by exposed wires. The album cost £17,000 and peaked at number 24 in the UK. Trident skimmed royalties, leaving them nearly empty-handed, but the music carried a raw force that would grow louder with each year. Freddie's art followed him everywhere. In 1971, he sketched the crest that would later appear on their debut album sleeve. Lions stood for Roger and John. A crab represented Brian. Fairies symbolized Virgo. A phoenix rose above a crowned Q. Those drawings stirred fans decades later, especially when hidden details hinted at crosses and pentagram alignments. Printers rejected the sleeve 3 times for its detail. Tour robes embroidered with the crest in 1975 cost £500 each. Today, collectors treat those designs like treasure. His stage style found its own legend too. During an early 1972 college show, the base of his mic stand snapped during Son and Daughter. Instead of panicking, he swung the remaining pole like a prop. The crowd loved it. That mistake became his trademark for the next 20 years. Only a handful of people knew it started as an accident. Then came Killer Queen in 1974. More than 100 radio stations rejected it before it climbed to number 2 in the UK on October 20th and reached number 12 on the US Billboard. Freddie wrote its lyrics in 10 minutes. Brian was recovering from hepatitis and heard the demo from his sickbed. The single became their first American hit and changed their career path. Their first US tour in 1974 told a different story. They played to tiny crowds. Some nights, people booed their outfits and poses. But those moments hardened them. Within 2 years, they returned as arena giants. Months later, in 1975, Bohemian Rhapsody arrived as a 6-minute wave that confused everyone. It had no chorus. It mixed ballad, opera, and rock. Producers called it a mess. Freddie secretly gave a copy to DJ Kenny Everett, who played it 14 times in 2 days, igniting demand so strong that EMI had no choice but to release it. It reached number 1 for 9 weeks, starting November 23, 1975, and sold more than 1 million copies. Its layers came from 180 overdubs and endless rewinds. The song became a moment the world never forgot. His fear of dentists caused another twist in 1976, when he skipped a TV performance because of a toothache. Producers replaced Queen with the Sex Pistols on short notice. What followed was the infamous live meltdown that pushed punk into the spotlight. Freddie watched the chaos from a distance, unaware that his absence had helped shape a movement. Later that decade, his relationship with Mary Austin changed forever. He proposed on Christmas Day 1973 with a jade ring hidden inside stacked Russian dolls. She accepted, believing he was hers alone. Weeks later, he confessed he was attracted to men. They ended their romance, but never their bond. She became the person he trusted most and inherited most of his fortune after his death. Queen's stadium era exploded with We Are the Champions and We Will Rock You from their 1977 album. One unforgettable moment came during a Chicago blizzard on December 1, 1977, when a power outage plunged their show into darkness. Instead of leaving, 18,000 fans stomped and clapped the beat of We Will Rock You for 20 straight minutes. That roar forged the ritual crowds still follow today. By 1981, they were kings across continents. In São Paulo's Morumbi Stadium on March 20th, 131,000 fans filled the venue for the largest paid crowd for any band at the time, with another 120,000 the next day. Riots broke out for tickets. Barriers collapsed. The stage shook. Those nights helped launch Queen's legend across South America. In 1979, Freddie stepped into a dream he carried from childhood when he performed with the Royal Ballet at the London Coliseum. He wore white tights and a crown and danced to Bohemian Rhapsody and Crazy Little Thing Called Love. Critics loved it. He rehearsed for a week and pushed his body until it ached, yet every leap looked effortless. Around that same time, Crazy Little Thing Called Love came to him in a Munich bathtub in 1979. He wrote it in 10 minutes, called for a piano to be dragged into the bathroom, and rushed to record it. It became Queen's first U.S. #1 on February 23, 1981. Behind the scenes, shadows formed. Paul Prenter entered his life in 1975 and stayed until 1985, controlling access, cutting him off from the band, and stealing money. He betrayed Freddie in 1987 by selling private information to the press for £32,000. His presence nearly tore the band apart. Even collaborations held chaos. In 1983, Freddie and Michael Jackson tried recording 3 songs together, but Jackson kept bringing his pet llama into the studio. After the animal chewed cables and left droppings, Freddie called his manager begging to escape. The partnership ended instantly. Queen's 1982 album Hot Space marked a bold shift toward disco and funk that clashed heavily within the band. Sales dropped sharply. Fans disliked the direction. Fights broke out in the studio. They would not fully recover until Live Aid. Then came July 13th, 1985. Wembley Stadium. 72,000 people in front of him. 1.9 billion watching from home. Freddie walked onto that stage and delivered a performance the world now calls the greatest live act ever recorded. His voice soared. His call and response shook the stadium. And the entire planet watched him reclaim Queen's throne. Drama followed in 1984 during the Works Tour, when thick smoke effects swallowed him during Bohemian Rhapsody in Munich. Fans screamed thinking he had died. He reappeared moments later and turned panic into relief. His private circle knew another side of him. He gave drag nicknames to stars he loved, calling Elton John Sharon and Rod Stewart Phyllis. He even used Melina for himself. These names came from affection, not insult. His bisexual life unfolded quietly under fame. He dated women publicly, especially Mary Austin, and explored relationships with men privately. His journals held drawings and desires he could never share openly. That internal conflict helped create the stage persona that mesmerized millions. Freddie Mercury's Barcelona project began at a moment when his life was drifting into a storm he was trying hard to hide. Yet the spark that started it came from something pure. He had admired Montserrat Caballé for years, and during a 1986 Spanish TV interview, he called her voice the best in the world. That single comment reached people close to her. Soon, Barcelona won the 1992 Olympics bid, and that brought their paths even closer. When they finally met in February 1987 in her home city, she expected a simple anthem. Freddie wanted more, and the moment she smiled at him, he found the courage to say it. Instead of one song, he asked to do a whole album. She agreed, and they ended up recording at Mountain Studios in Montreux through early 1987. Because her schedule was tight, he sometimes sang her soprano parts in falsetto on the demos, layering his baritone under her soaring voice, while musicians like Homi Kanga and Frank Ricotti filled the room with strings and percussion. Their title track came out in May 1987 and later became the anthem for the 1992 Olympics. She performed it alone at the July 25th opening ceremony because Freddie had died 7 months earlier on November 24, 1991. She once told him to keep his rock tenor instead of trying baritone lines beside her, and that moment gave them the blend that reached from F2 to F6. Those 3 days of marathon sessions pushed his nerves and hinted at pressures already building behind the scenes as Queen entered a tense, uncertain period. That tension carried into the making of Queen's Miracle album in 1988 and 1989. It became their last full LP with Freddie, recorded while he fought a secret AIDS battle that weighed on him every hour, even though he did his best to hide it. The band worked digitally from February 1988 into early 1989, leaving analog tape behind. Tracks like I Want It All were built layer by layer, while Freddie tried to mask throat issues, bronchial problems, and early AIDS symptoms, such as lesions on his tongue that had been whispered about since 1982. He even lip-synced the May 1989 I Want It All video to hide how rough his voice felt. Around this time, he still told reporters he was HIV negative, protecting his privacy by pushing away questions, even though he told the band the truth only in May 1989. They decided to credit all songs collectively, so no one would question why Freddie seemed tired or why sessions slowed. The album dropped on May 27, 1989, hit #1 in the UK, and sold more than 2 million copies. Yet the promo work revealed how thin he looked and how fragile his voice had become. The distance between Freddie and Queen grew during this era. His passion for solo work like Barcelona stole time from them, and everyone felt the strain. After Freddie passed, the world saw the weight he had been carrying during those final years. The Freddie Mercury tribute concert, planned just after his death, took place on April 20, 1992, at Wembley Stadium. 72,000 fans filled the seats, and nearly 1 billion people watched on TV. Those who were close to him said the world needed to see what had been hidden. By summer 1991, he had dropped from 143 pounds to under 100, lost most of a foot because of infections, and could barely see. The concert raised $20 million for AIDS research and sparked the Mercury Phoenix Trust. Stars like Elton John, Axl Rose, David Bowie, George Michael, and Liza Minnelli took the stage for him. Elton even sang "The Show Must Go On" with Tony Iommi backing him. The truth that surfaced around this time showed how far Freddie's decline had gone since the mid-1980s, when he brushed off throat infections and ignored warnings, climbing deeper into denial and cocaine cycles. His inner circle had protected his privacy as long as they could, but by then, the world had already seen glimpses of the damage. That damage shaped the making of Innuendo, Queen's 1991 farewell album. Freddie was often in a wheelchair during the later sessions, starting in March 1990 and ending by summer 1991. His body was failing, yet he recorded with relentless will. Brian May doubted he could sing "The Show Must Go On" because the notes were brutal. But Freddie downed a vodka on May 16, 1990, and said he would do it. Then he tore through the track with a voice that still cut through everything. The lyrics about flaking makeup and a breaking heart carried more truth than most listeners knew. He kept claiming HIV negative even after his April 1987 diagnosis, and told the band only in May 1989. The single came out on February 4, 1991, and reached #1 in the UK after his death that November. His last video appearance was in April 1990. People who saw him said the wheelchair and the secrecy surrounding it created tension inside Queen, because no one was ready to accept how fast he was fading. By June 1991, he retired completely, and by fall he was bedridden while Mary Austin cared for him. His last message to the world encouraged everyone to fight AIDS, even though he was approaching the end at only 45. The truth behind his illness stretched back years. He had been diagnosed in April 1987, but kept insisting he was HIV negative. His assistant Peter Freestone watched him use up to 2 grams of cocaine a day in those early periods. Jim Hutton later confirmed that Freddie had avoided returning calls from doctors after a positive test in 1986, delaying the moment he would have to face it. Signs had appeared early. A tongue lesion in 1982, throat nodules in 1985, yet interviews in late 1986 quoted him saying he was perfectly fit. Through 1987, he repeated the lie that he was negative even as the disease moved quickly. Freestone managed his schedule starting in 1979, handling errands, lovers, and cocaine runs, while the police ignored everything because Freddie kept things discreet. The hedonism of the early 1980s carried into years when his body could no longer handle it. By 1991, he had dropped to around 98 pounds, lost vision in one eye, and faced procedures on his foot because the tissue was dying. 2 weeks before his death, he stopped all AIDS medication except for painkillers so he could control the ending. His death on November 24th became the moment the world finally understood the truth he had hidden. Pain in his life came from betrayal, too. Paul Prenter had been his personal manager and lover from 1977 to 1986. On May 4th, 1987, Prenter sold a story to The Sun that ripped open Freddie's privacy across 7 pages. The headline screamed about Freddie's gay life, and Prenter pocketed £32,000 for it, worth about $100,000 today. He exposed stories about Munich parties, hundreds of one-night stands, drug-fueled scenes, and even gave away 300 private photos. Brian May and Roger Taylor had already warned Freddie that Prenter was isolating him, blocking interviews, and manipulating him. Freddie finally fired Prenter in February 1987, after jealousy over Jim Hutton grew too obvious. When the story broke, it crushed him. He increased security at Garden Lodge and never spoke to Prenter again. The irony landed heavy later. Prenter died of AIDS on August 4, 1991, 3 months before Freddie, leaving behind letters full of regret. Through all of this, Mary Austin stayed the constant in Freddie's life. They met in 1969 when she worked at the Biba Boutique. In 1973, he proposed on Christmas, with small boxes tucked inside each other, until she found a jade ring at the end. He called her his common-law wife, even after their romantic relationship ended in 1976. She lived close by, helped manage his life, and stayed loyal when others came and went. In April 1991, months before he died, he wrote his will. He left her Garden Lodge, the Kensington mansion he bought in 1980 for £10 million, along with half his fortune. Over time, as other shares transferred, she inherited 75% of his £28.5 million estate by 1993. He once said, "All my lovers asked why they couldn't replace Mary. She remained the one who knew everything, who kept his secrets, and who nursed him until the end." Jim Hutton, who became his partner from 1985 until his death in 1991, carried the everyday weight of Freddie's illness. They had met at the nightclub Heaven in 1983, but Jim rejected him the first time. They reconnected a year later and moved into Garden Lodge in 1985. Jim kept his £10 an hour hairdresser job while caring for Freddie. In 1987, after the Prenter scandal, Freddie proposed using the same jade ring he once gave Mary. Jim wore it on his right hand. His 1994 book, Mercury and Me, describes bathing Freddie, helping with medications, and watching him lose 30 pounds by 1990. After Freddie died, Mary evicted Jim despite the £500,000 Freddie left him. Jim returned to Ireland, where he lived until his death from cancer on January 1, 2010, at age 60. Even with tension and arguments, he kept loving Freddie until the end. Rumors added layers to Freddie's already dramatic life. One story claimed he had a secret daughter born in 1976 from an affair with a friend's Catholic wife who rejected an abortion. A 2025 biography named her only as B, now 48, a medical professional in Europe who claimed he visited her every year. According to the book, she inherited 17 journal volumes he wrote about Zanzibar, India, and London. Mary Austin denied the story in 2025, but the author said she spent 3.5 years verifying the journals. Whether true or not, the idea shook the image of Freddie as childless and reintroduced questions about the hidden parts of his past. Freddie's teeth had always been a source of pain. He had 4 extra incisors due to hyperdontia, which pushed his front teeth forward. Kids in Zanzibar bullied him for it, and he hid his mouth with his hand in photo. Dentists told him to fix it during the 1960s, but he refused. He believed the extra space helped his voice and gave him the power to move between growls and falsetto. His range stretched from F2 to F6, and a 2016 UCL study showed his vibrato reached around 5.1 hertz, stronger than many sopranos. Even with money later on, he kept those teeth because he feared any change would ruin his sound. In the end, the thing that embarrassed him helped create a legend. By 1991, his decline reached a heartbreaking peak. After finishing Innuendo in June, he retired from public life at 44 and stayed in Garden Lodge. Bronchial pneumonia hit him hard that summer. He walked only with help, shuffled through rooms with Jim Hutton or Peter Freestone at his side. Brian May remembered seeing oxygen tubes hidden under thick makeup that covered Capozzi's sarcoma lesions. During his last video promo on May 30th, 1991, he collapsed 3 times and whispered that he looked like a ghost. Yet Freestone said he still laughed, joked, and sang bits from bed. By November, he stopped all medication except painkillers. His last known photos were taken on August 28, 1991, in the garden. He wore sharp clothes and smiled from a distance to hide how thin he had become. Even then, he tried to leave the world with dignity. On November 23, 1991, he released the announcement he had avoided for years. Past midnight, he dictated a 67-word statement to his manager, Jim Beach, confirming he had AIDS. By morning, every major paper carried it. For years, tabloids had hunted him, snapping photos of his thinning frame, pushing him with questions he refused to answer. He admitted the truth only 24 hours before he died. Fans woke up to his words, then lost him the next day. His final breath came at 6:48 in the evening on November 24, 1991. Jim Hutton, Mary Austin, Peter Freestone, and chef Joe Finelli stayed around his bed while he whispered "thank you" at noon. His parents arrived after he was gone. He had stopped eating the night before. His body convulsed earlier from pain. He died at home, just as he wanted. The cremation followed quietly. Queen announced it the next morning, and the world went into mourning. His private Zoroastrian funeral on November 27th lasted only 25 minutes. About 35 people attended. The coffin went in with Aretha Franklin playing and came out to Cabaret singing Verdi. Mary carried out his wish to hide his ashes, and no one has revealed their location. He was laid to rest as Farrokh Bulsara, the name he was born with. Decades later, Garden Lodge still held secrets. In 2024, architects inspecting the house uncovered a hidden chamber behind a wardrobe. Inside were childhood photos from Zanzibar, handwritten drafts, and unreleased Queen demos with a value estimated in the millions. No one had ever mentioned this room. It felt like Freddie had been guarding one last part of his story. Even after his death, his voice kept rising. Made in Heaven came out on November 6, 1995. The band used recordings he made during his final months in Montreux and rebuilt them into full songs. He recorded parts of Mother Love from May 13th to May 16th before telling Brian May he felt too unwell to continue. Brian sang the last verse because Freddie never returned. The album reached #1 in the UK and sold more than 1 million copies there. It proved that even in his weakest moments, he could leave behind powerful music. Bohemian Rhapsody arrived in 2018 and brought his legend to a new generation. The film reached more than $900 million worldwide on a $52 million budget. Rami Malek won every major acting award for playing Freddie. Critics questioned the timeline changes and dramatic scenes, but audiences loved it. It reopened old wounds for Mary Austin, who disliked how Hollywood handled private parts of her life with him. Yet it also revived Queen's music and brought millions back to Live Aid, which became one of the most streamed concert moments in history. Mary later auctioned parts of his estate in 2023, raising more than £40 million. She sold items like his Steinway piano for $8.1 million and handwritten lyrics for huge sums. The house went on the market in 2024 for $30 million. She kept his memory intact for decades and then slowly let the world share pieces of it. Live Aid itself continued to grow in legend. By 2025, Queen's 20-minute set had been streamed more than 2 billion times. Surveys placed it among the greatest live performances in history. Freddie, 40 years old then, controlled the crowd like no one else. His voice and presence made that moment feel timeless. Stories from his life still surfaced, including one from 1988, when Princess Diana went out disguised with Freddie, Kenny Everett, and Cleo Rocos to a gay bar. They joked, drank champagne, and sneaked her past everyone without anyone knowing who she was. She laughed freely there, hidden in plain sight. The night stayed a secret until Rocos revealed it years later.